something in a cage with all this plastic.
It's even worse is when you get stuck in the jungle cage by the elevator.
All right, well, hi, friendly colleagues down the hall.
Oh.
Our conference committee today is to discuss House Bill 73, birth certificates. And as you are probably aware, since we have a conference committee, the House decided not to concur with Senate amendments to the one, you just had one amendment on our bill that passed, brought by Senator Steinmetz, that dealt with what would be section G on page 3. I'll just read it. Compensation is limited to expenses related to prenatal care, delivery of the child, and any other costs, including the cost of lost opportunity that are directly connected to the pregnancy. And just so we can share their concerns, and I know I brought some of them, which is why I'm the chair of the conference committee. Funny how that works, right? I did have some concerns on basically cost accounting and making a pregnant woman have to keep track of all of her expenses while pregnant, especially in later months of time, gas, whatever it would be, medical care. Maybe some of those things are easy, but it did seem, and I was also confused, it's limited to expenses, but then it says any other costs. And so I was a little confused on the wording, how you limit to expenses related to any other costs. So the language just, well, and I think the House would have got 8 aye votes and 52 no votes, that we said we would just have a friendly talk on maybe the rationale for that language going in the bill, and if we could come to a consensus on how we could make it better.
Okay, well, the reason, I suppose I need to turn the microphone on. The reason this amendment came about is because there have been concerns floating about that women are not exploited by surrogacy. And so this amendment sought to address that issue. We started out with just the costs of expenses related to prenatal care, delivery of the child, and then just any other costs connected to the pregnancy. But then we thought there might be lost opportunity costs, such as not being able to go to work, not being able to function normally, possibly a maid coming in, something like those types of things. And so that is the genesis of the amendment and why this is before you today. We crafted it this way to include all of that. And so that's where we're at and how we got there.
All right, committee members, so correct me if I'm wrong. But at least 2 of us, and maybe even all 3 of us, agree that understanding of the compensation is important. I'm not sure to the public interest, but we probably all share the agreement that we don't want pregnant women to be exploited, and
Yes.
people, especially coming in from, let's say, out of state and spending money for designer babies. And we did try to put some amendments on the House, as I'm sure you saw, to try to limit that to residency and those type of things.
Mhm.
So I think when it comes, I'm just concerned about the wording, and I know Representative Prego had some thoughts that he might offer to clean up. Did you have already pre-existing language? We did discuss some. Anything you want to share, Representative?
I did. So, yeah. So I had several thoughts. I mean, one, I didn't really understand the language lost opportunity, cost of lost opportunity. What exactly did that mean? It was sort of vague to me as I read the language. I understood the purpose of it and not necessarily opposed to that, but it just didn't carry a lot of weight in my mind as to what are we really defining. The other problem I had with the amendment on the Senate side was it does essentially, in my mind, it prevents a couple from paying a surrogate to carry the baby. I mean, I think that's the intent, and I wasn't on board with that. I thought if we have a willing surrogate and we have a couple that wants to pay that surrogate, that they should be able to do that through this process, because they can do it anyways. We don't have a law preventing that today. I mean, you could go do that. It's just at the end of the process, then you have to go through the adoption. Once the baby's born, you'd have to go through the adoption process to formalize it. Whereas with the bill, I think the intent was to get outside of that and to make it easier for the mother, the donors, I guess, is what and that's how and I know Representative Wilson has some other thoughts on that, but when I was thinking about the bill and the purpose of it, and my wife does some adoption law, so I know a little bit about this and how expensive it is and how it could affect people's ability to do this. But with that amendment, I think they won't go through this process. They'll just be stuck unless it's their sister or something like that who says, yeah, I'd be willing to carry this baby for my sister or my brother or whatever for the couple. I think they're just gonna end up not using the process set out in the bill. I think so it just takes the purpose out of the bill. My thought was, as far as a compromise, was instead of using this language, we just require them to put the actual compensation, if any, in the agreement. And that would be recorded. And then although it's recorded and it's confidential, I think we could keep statistics on that so that the register, the vital records, would actually know what those numbers are. And then if it becomes a problem over time, we could look at that. We would actually have the statistics. We wouldn't know who it applies to, but we would have general statistics, and maybe we can put that in the bill, give them the ability to keep statistics on that so that we would know over time, okay, this is getting out of control. We can go back and either get rid of the bill, get rid of the law, or fix it and not allow compensation at all. I don't know. That was one thought I had that would sort of address everybody's concerns, at least in the short term.
So the two of us, if I made a motion and also can tweak the language, that's saying the contract shall record the total amount of compensation, and we even do a directive, and shall be used by the Office of Vital Records for statistical purposes. That way the Vital Records Office has some mandate to release, and I don't know how many of these there are, but I would assume, there's got to be 5 or 10 a year in Wyoming, right? I don't think I know of 3 people who were conceived this way in Wyoming and went through this process, and
Well, hold up just a minute there,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, because I think that that's exactly what the Senate was trying to restrict, is that there is compensation associated with it. And so I think that that's what the amendment, we wanted to limit it to costs associated with pregnancy and carrying the child, and not to, because that was the concern we were trying to address, was that it would become a for-profit venture.
but in some ways it might already be, we just don't know it. I mean, that's my other word. I
Right.
think some of these happen that I know of, and it was here's $15,000, carry my child, because we can't have one, kind of arrangement. But so the thought of, you don't want to limit total compensation, right? Saying nobody shall pay more than a certain amount of money. We're all open for suggestion if you got some.
I think that if we could put in language, I think Representative Craig will probably hit it on the nose. I mean, this is up to the other committee members too, but something to the effect of, and I'm trying to think of how to word it, not prenatal, because it's not prenatal, all costs associated with the pregnancy, including prenatal care, delivery, and customary cost of pregnancy. That doesn't sound, that's not the right word. We know where I'm going to say will be negotiated into the contract. Does that make any sense? And that way we avoid saying, okay, we're going to pay you $20,000 to be the surrogate mother, because that's not associated with the cost of pregnancy. That cost, because up front how much it's going to cost for prenatal care, what the delivery costs you, unless there's something extraordinary, an emergency delivery, a C-section, an emergency C-section kind of thing.
And that is good language, Senator Baldwin. I guess what I'm trying to understand from you guys is, are you saying that there should be a contract for services that is above cost of the pregnancy and possible lost opportunity?
I just believe that happens now. I guess there should still, in my mind, there's still, I don't even know how you quantify, not a female, but I would assume 9 months of someone's life, there's more they give than just the basic cost. There's some wear and tear, or that's not the right word, some use, I mean, some intangible costs, I would assume, to have a child that are, I don't know how you quantify, and that, a woman willing to do this is probably within her right to ask for, an extra $2,000 to $5,000 for, just having to be, walking around and dealing with being pregnant, at least in the last couple of months. But there's 3 females here, so tell me all about, I just assume there should be another cost above fixed cost for loss of, I don't know, you want to call it loss of opportunity, but there's some intangible cost, right, to carrying a child?
Well, and that's what I was just going to say, that the lost opportunities, when I read that, to me, it was talking about the fact that some people can't work when they're pregnant. I mean, I worked right up till the day but I might be the rare exception to the rule. And many of them, if they have complications or they have different health issues that come up, cannot work. And so I felt like the lost opportunities maybe took that into account. But I don't know, are you guys kind of erring on the side of still feeling like there's a number that would make it all? I don't know.
How these work, but you can't pay all the costs up front without knowing what the costs are ahead of time, right? So you almost have to, upon delivery, say, here are all my costs and redo the contract. That's
Well, my only thought is people are going to do this anyways. And so if you want to pay, if you have to pay somebody to be a gestational carrier, you're going to have to go outside. I mean, with the amendment, you're going to have to go outside the scope of the bill. You're just going to have to go back to the old process, which we don't prohibit that in Wyoming. There's no law against it. I mean, you can go do it today if you want. My only thought is if we at least get them in here, and that was my idea with the amendment, was at least we'd know what was going on. The other way, we don't really, I mean, they do have to go through the adoption process, but I don't know, they wouldn't have to disclose any of that information at court when they go through the adoption process. The gestational mother would sign over the paperwork as part of the agreement up front. And that's how it would be part of an agreement. They'd have to go through the adoption process. They'd have to hire a lawyer, but that would all be put into an agreement ahead of time. And the court would never see that. No one would ever see that except the lawyers and the gestational mother, the carrier, and the 2 people, the couple, asking her, agreeing with her, contracting with her to do it. So that was my only thought, was at least we would have some idea from a standpoint of knowing what the heck's going on.
And I don't want to speak for you, but I think in my mind, and tell me if you agree, the purpose of the bill, from my understanding, was really to help with the adoption fee and the expenses that were already been occurring for 20 years in my part of the state, and a certain judge in a certain county said you don't really have legal authority to do it without going through the full adoption process. And so I believe Chairman Greer brought the bill with you as co-sponsor to solve that problem. And so I'm not excited about limiting anything that goes on now. I mean, I certainly agree we don't want to expand it and try to become, some haven for this kind of activity to happen. But I guess I'm not interested in limiting what is already possible too much. There's probably some nefarious things that have happened, and we should limit those. But I hate to take away rights that people currently have to do these in a bill that was designed to make it easier on adoption costs. I don't know if any of you are on that page or not. I don't think Chairman Wilson is. Yeah.
Maybe I can just summarize where I'm at. So people know I'm down here not saying very much. So I was actually in the chair the first day this came up. So, you never really get to read the bill when you're in the chair, right? So I didn't actually look at it until later. And I'll just say I don't think this bill can be fixed from my perspective. And my reasoning is just that the discussion on the floor and, in hallways and stuff has been, well, this is just about, a man and a woman wanting to have their biological child, and this is the way of doing it. But if you actually read the text of the bill, there is no specific information about whose egg it is or whose sperm it is. I mean, it could be anybody's egg, anybody's sperm. nothing, not even actually biologically from the two people who are going to be the parents. I mean, it's totally unidentified. So just from my perspective, I mean, I will make a good try to make, the wording on the compensation part be something. But, from my own perspective, unless we were to like go to a total open committee and be able to write in and limit the bill to the actual producer of the sperm and the egg, I feel like we're just kind of opening up this runaround of people to and I was pointing out before you guys came that I went and looked up all the surrounding statutes, and we have and I won't go on about this for a long time, but the bill doesn't at all bring in 14.2 Article 4 of that, which has in our statutes establishment of parent-child relationship. And it says that the mother-child relationship and then the father-child relationship in parallel is established by the woman's having given birth to the child and adjudication of the woman's maternity or adoption of the child. And then it does the same thing basically for fathers. And so there's no adjudication in this. There's no adoption. There's no birth by the woman. And so it's just going down to a private contract with no adjudication or anything. And so that's why I'm not comfortable with the bill at all, but I'll give, as I say, I'll give a good try at helping with the amendment language. I just wanted you to know where I'm at.
The first conference committee is some agreement between the two houses, and it deals with one amendment on compensation. So, I mean, we can expand when it comes to compensation and see if, I'm not super convinced Chairman Wilson is going to, your concerns, I think, are much broader than
Right.
anything between compensation. So I'm just not expecting you're going to sign.
You're right. But I'll give it a good
So-
participation try anyway.
So if we can come to where two of you are, we're happy to do so. If you want to throw some
I'm just
thoughts
gonna
out.
say real quick that I'm right on line with Representative Wilson. I voted against the bill because I felt like there were just too many issues out there that I wasn't comfortable with. But I'm A-okay to give the amendment a shot and try to help out and, come to concurrence. I'll play the team role. I don't know about Fred.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I realize that this bill and this amendment don't address all the issues surrounding this topic, and it really maybe needs to move to an interim topic or something that we can kind of start looking at this issue a little more closely, because it has raised a lot of concerns with a lot of constituencies, and rightly so. So, but that's not what is before us today. So I'd like to make this the best that we can, if we can. And if not, I guess we'll go from there. So you guys are the ones with the concern. We felt this language addressed the concerns we had. And, just to protect our women and children that are entering into these contracts. So. And you have a different perspective of it, obviously, so.
Go, yeah.
So just a question, I mean, how does that provision, and this, I'm just playing stupid here because I don't know the answer. How does that protect the women and children by saying we can't pay them to be the carrier? That'd be my question. And I'm willing to learn. I want to know because I don't understand that.
You'd have to prove lost opportunity. I mean, from what I think I understand you're doing, or what the amendment does, is there is no, sorry, go to the business world, there's fixed costs, right? And we will compensate for all fixed costs of the pregnancy, whatever they are, plus whatever lost opportunity might be, which is subjective.
Yeah.
But we would get away from ever being able to say, here's, there's a $10,000 flat fee to cover the kid. And I mean, in some ways, I just think that is easier. I mean, I want 100,000, right? But instead of someone having to keep track of everything to make sure this contract so they can legally adopt their kid, who in many cases would be biologically, at least for one of, if not both parents, right, their progeny. I just hate to make it too onerous from what current state is that, right now you can go just say, hey, I'll just give you 30,000, that'll cover everything, including all this, keep whatever's extra. And I think that's where you guys are trying to say, we don't think that's really a good thing. But I would say that's what I think just goes on, maybe not in all cases, but a lot of cases. So, I mean, I understand. And it's just that lost opportunity is subjective, and I don't know how you quantify that, each individual person. But who determines, not vital records, not, you're the lawyer, who would?
Well, and the thing is.
Yeah.
Is so, or sorry, whoever you are.
I'm the
You know,
joint
the
conference
thing
committee
is,
chairman.
it doesn't state that the compensation, I mean, we're not. The thing is, so if you look back where it says on bottom of page 2, gestational agreement means something where, okay, and then going over to the bottom of page 3 in paragraph F, the agreement is filed with the registrar. So the agreement is completed, the contract is carried out, notarized, completed by the time Vital Records ever sees it. I mean, because the baby is born, it's done. All they're doing is filing the document. So, I mean, I don't really know what role the Vital Records registrar would have to take the contract and say, well, this is an inadequate contract, and now you can't record the baby's birth. I mean, that's not really going to happen. I don't see how that could be. It's just going to, I mean, I'm not really sure, how that would work. I mean, are we going to say that Guy Bedoin can't record the thing if you spent more than $220,000 on the baby? I mean, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I totally support what Senator Steinmetz is saying as far as not commercializing this, because, when you look at international gestational agreements, you've got whole houses of women in India where all they do is pop out a baby, rest 3 months and do another one. I mean, it's really gruesome. So I totally support that concept, but I wonder.
There's nothing in this language that would invalidate the contract more than a pregnant woman carries a child, decides she doesn't want to go through with the contract after all. I mean, they already have an agreement that she'd be violating. There's nothing with this language she could come back and have. Maybe she could prove that they didn't cover all the costs.
So if I can bring something back, and Representative Crago will know the best probably as the attorney. So back in this 14.2 Article 4 business, the one that talks about how, assisted reproduction and defines parentage and stuff. There's a part in here, paragraph D, where it says, this act does not authorize or prohibit an agreement between a woman and a man and another woman in which the woman relinquishes all rights, and I'm kind of go on, provided that. And then it says, if a birth results under such an agreement and the agreement is unenforceable under Wyoming law, the parent-child relationship is determined as provided in Article 4. So I underline that because I don't really know what that is. What would make an agreement be unenforceable? Is there anything from that would somehow roll into this? I mean, I don't know what it is. That's why I'm asking you, because I don't know.
Yeah, I said possibly, for instance, if the agreement was a product of duress,
Yeah,
like you force somebody or you misrepresented
right.
something, and
Right.
getting someone to sign the agreement, that would be unenforceable. And then, so then that would go back to Title 14, Chapter 2, rather than dealing, we're in Title 35, I think. In this
Most of it is
yeah.
in Title 35, right?
So yes.
But that doesn't help us with any wording on this. I was
I
just
don't
wondering whether
think
there would be
so.
something that could be extracted from the concepts there, as far as the content of the. So I guess what we're getting at, I mean, when you consider that what we're trying to have here, and I'm trying to think of it in the best light, what we're trying to do is enable people to basically not use the adoption process, but instead to use a contractual process. And so I guess what maybe could happen, I mean, I don't know whether we want to put rulemaking. I mean, I don't think the registrar wants any of this authority, but if they gave you a piece of paper and it was something that was against the interests of all parties in a way that you can't allow contracts to be, whatever that might be. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking to try to
Yeah.
brainstorm a little bit here.
It's still in the first conference has to come somewhere between the two positions on the compensation.
Right, right.
aspects.
And, but that's where I'm trying to get where the ideas, so, because I would be perfectly happy with compensation is limited to expenses related to prenatal medical care and delivery of the child, but I can, your discussion about wanting to have some other, what if we said, and any other identified costs directly connected to the pregnancy. I mean, it's still kind of vague, but the word identified to me suggests that it has to have some rational linkage to, I had to take 2 months off of work. I mean, to me, that identified ties it with something. Now, I don't know what the registrar of deeds is going to do about it, but if there were ever some sort of a lawsuit or something like, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out.
Go ahead.
Is there, I'm just throwing this out there. Is there like a dollar figure where you could say the lost opportunity cost can't exceed such and such, where you could still, we would keep it from getting to such a high level that we don't have to worry about the commercialization of it? Is that a possibility?
That's exactly
Yeah.
where I was gonna
We-
go
a
is
cap.
if there was some kind of a cap on, pregnancy costs. And then not to exceed blah, 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 unless identified costs, like I said, it could depend on some. If you had toxemia or you had, preeclampsia or something like that, that caused you have to go to the hospital or to lose work, I think it could cost a little more, but I like the idea. That's sort of what I was thinking in terms of a number.
Go ahead.
So just to comment on that, the reason the word cost is there though is because it is an expense that you have incurred other than the opportunity cost, which we were trying to capture. So yeah, if you want to cap that, that would be fine. I just, every situation could be fairly different.
Yeah, the
Well,
thing is that makes it
depends on where
difficult.
you're at.
If the gestational carrier is a cleaning lady versus an attorney.
Right.
And if we put in some number like $20,000, do we have to look at this again in 10 years? I mean, hopefully we will, but I don't know.
So I think we have to talk about two different categories. One is costs and I'm still thinking about the compensation, but we could put a cap on that. And then they always have the backstop. If it goes over that cap, they can go back to the other procedure, which is open court. I mean, and so it still would allow, if you wanted to pay your sister 10 grand plus her medical expenses to carry your baby, you could. But and we can pick a small number. I'm just throwing this out there. It wouldn't have to be a big number, or it's still in line with the lost opportunity cost. And you could cap that at whatever. I mean,
What's the enforcement possibility for that? I mean, you're not going to get the registrar of vital records to look at this paper and read a 6-page contract or whatever and decide whether, I mean, I don't see that happening.
Is the district judge gonna look at it and say, here's your gestational agreement, let me see what the cost was, and you need to prove
There's
those
no
facts?
adjudication thing in this. That's the whole
Oh, you
point.
don't need to have it just naturally happens, so that doesn't even go before a
it
judge.
goes on the birth certificate. That's the way the
So
bill is written.
how would
Right.
anyone ever know what the?
Well,
I mean,
and that's true whether we just stayed with the Senate amendment or not, it's equally true. We would never know. I mean, if somebody wants to do a side deal, so to speak, and pay somebody to do it, we would never know.
Right.
No one would ever know. It's a sealed document. It goes to the register.
And like we said, this bill is not gonna fix all of the things associated with this issue. And so back to the amendment. In the words that we have to work with. I think that one of the places of disagreement at this, I think our body, the whole point was not to pay someone to have a child for you. It was to pay for the costs, not to have a contract. First, I mean, for services, basically. We were willing to pay for the lost opportunity when she couldn't work and all of those things associated with that. Is this where we wave our arms?
No.
Because we're in the dark?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but I think that that was the whole point, was to, that it couldn't be the business of being a surrogate mother. So,
So can people, if we pass this, people could still go around it and still do the old fashioned adoption process?
I don't think this precludes it.
It doesn't. So all we're really doing is if you want a birth certificate without going through the adoption process, I mean, maybe I am okay with it then, right? Because the people who are gonna be doing what none of us really want to see can still do it. They just have to pay even more costs to do the official adoption. Seems kind of antithetical, right? That then we're almost encouraging them to pay more and not have an easier process, but that wouldn't. I'm open to suggest, I mean, at that point, now that I realize they can go around this, this is really just, you need to prove to somebody who's can't do anything.
The vital records.
The vital record, she's not gonna say, well, no, you need to prove these expenses and I want to see all the receipts from the hospital, right? I mean, they're just not gonna do that. I just
Well,
can't
it'd be
imagine.
great if we could come up with a set cost. That this is approximately what, or the average cost of a pregnancy, but like you said, there's all these other things
If
that,
we could do a cost,
yeah,
or
that,
any,
that would be great.
any contract under $10,000, you can go through and not have to go through the normal process. I think I'm okay with that type of amendment. Is
Would
that,
work though?
you're not okay with that? Okay, cool.
You know,
Well,
the cost of having a baby, the cost of the pregnancy, very huge. I mean, it's a wide variety from place to place. If you go across the state, you're gonna hear just this enormous band. So in my mind, to say something like the cost of the normal pregnancy or the cost of the medical care related to the pregnancy, and then something like an unintended cost due to the pregnancy, or that doesn't sound right, but you're gonna have to, you can't set an amount on the delivery, on the cost. That's impossible. That's not even feasible.
so, I mean, does this language not do that?
I guess I'm okay with the language, if that's the process to get the person. Sorry, I think I'm okay with the language, if that's the process, but people can go around it if they want. We can't stop all nefarious actions, but this allows the people who have those situations where it is a sibling or their best friend, and it's not about financials in any way. We give them, we don't put the extra burden of having to adopt their own child. And I'm talking myself into liking the amendment now, finally. Are you, yeah? You just want to make a motion to recede, or do you want to try to amend it up?
And the lost, leaving the lost opportunity cost in there? Because the thing is, if you take out that part and just have it say compensation is limited to expenses related to prenatal medical care and delivery, or what's the word, perinatal, or, having to do with surrounding the whole birth before and after, isn't there a word for that? Perinatal? For PA, huh? So to perinatal medical care, in delivery of the child. The thing is, that really does leave out the opportunity cost. That really does leave out the find another person, a military wife or whatever, because if it is your sister or somebody like that, they're probably going to be doing it for the medical costs. And so at least that assuages, it makes it so that the incentive of doing it this way is really self-limited to people with no monetary interest in it at all. I don't know.
I honestly think that even changing the language or leaving the language like it is, I think that mostly it's a discussion. I was telling people who had a problem with it, saying, you know, if they don't like this, they're just gonna go around it anyway. The bill doesn't solve anything. It's in the bill, it protects them if this happens, but I don't think changing the language is gonna change those people's minds. I think it's more around the discussion of, you know, here's what the bill is actually gonna do. And if people don't like to do it this way, if they don't want to get their names this way, they're just gonna go do it the other way anyway. And I think that's the bigger discussion here. I don't think changing the amendment is gonna make much difference to those people's thinking.
I would agree with that, but I do think we had that out on a second reading amendment in the Senate and it failed. So we had to put the lost opportunity clause in to get it to pass because everyone was worried about that. So we can take that out and try to go back if you'd like, but that's where they were at.
Well, House colleagues, we can basically just roll and recede from a non-concurrence and don't have to sign anything and ask the body to recede. Is that the easiest, or is there specific language? I mean, we can add some other words into here, but 8 to 52 for non-concurrence, but that's because Representative Craig and I started throwing questions.
Women
left-
at
yeah.
both sides.
You whipped the body.
Yeah.
People who didn't like it in the first place, and the people that were.
It wasn't, yeah.
But the bill, I mean, the bill vote in the beginning was actually also pretty high.
I'm
It was
s-
like 45.
I still think it got
15 or something.
40. I
I
can
don't-
look. Votes in the House were
We only had
6-3 in committee, 43-17. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about the bill until the day it came, and then I started getting emails.
Yeah.
Is the fact of the matter. It was kind of a mystery bill.
Two of it, you agreed in none, which is, okay. Well, we didn't want to waste all your time for half an hour, but I think at least two, I can check with our third, but we received from non-concurrence and say the language is what it is, and
Well, Mr. Chairman, we really appreciate your time to discuss this amendment and
we agree there's a larger issue out there that
We
we
do.
probably
We
need
all do,
to figure
so-
out what to do long
so
term.
this-
thank you
this
for
will come
your
back.
attention. Yep,
Don't you?
appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Brian. I think we're done. It looks like you don't have to write anything up because the House will recede from a non-concurrence, will be the plan.
Sounds great. Appreciate it, Mr.